back into our letters to the churches, and last week we talked about how Jesus identified himself to each church, and then this week, and we also talked about the praise that he gave to each church. So this week we're going to start with the rebuke, and we'll just see how far we get, okay? No promises to where we're going. So just a reminder, we have these 7 letters to the 7 churches that are kind of representative of the churches throughout all the ages, but they also can all exist inside the church on any given age. And they also were 7 specific churches for that age. So they kind of have 3 different compartments you can kind of put them into. So it's important that we look at this, the Laodicea church, as the church and its functions kind of through the end of the age. Even a couple of the others, we gave you the dates last week. But also that the attributes inside of each one of those churches can be represented to all the churches, even in this day and age today. I hope that makes sense. So each one but 2 had rebukes. So remember, there were 7 different kind of, it's almost, I don't want to say formulaic because that's a really bad word when it comes to scripture, because scripture has no formula, but each letter followed a pattern. And it had the identification of Christ, the praise, and now we're at the rebuke that's in the letters. Ephesus' rebuke was they had lost their first love. That could be said of so many of us in this day and age today. And it's a great question to ask ourselves, Lord, do I still love you now like I loved you in the beginning of this relationship? We see this in marriages, how they can, grow cold. The difference between a bride and a wife we talked about years ago in a Monday musing. And Jesus told the church of Ephesus, you've lost your first love. He told the church at Smyrna had no rebuke. Boy, isn't it nice to be a church that gets no rebuke from the Lord whatsoever. So it lets you know that is possible, which I love. Pergamum, they allowed false teaching inside of them, and some were even believing the false teaching that was happening. And we see that in spades in our society today. There's all kinds of false doctrine out there, and many precious believers have chosen to believe the false teaching that is being propagated. Some here in our own city in Nashville, and it's been heartbreaking to watch personally people that I know surrender themselves to teachings that are false. To the church at Thyatira, they were allowing a seducing spirit. They actually said the spirit of Jezebel to enter their church that enticed them through sexual immorality and idolatry. And we have a lot of seducing spirits today as well. To Sardis, they tried to act like they were alive, but in truth, they were dead. This is a very sad rebuke to me, but yet we see it often, people trying to pretend they're one thing, but if you pulled back the curtain like the great Wizard of Oz, you would see that they are something altogether different, that the persona doesn't match what happens even in private. The Church of Philadelphia had no rebuke either. And then the final church, the Church of Laodicea, Jesus said to them, you're neither hot nor cold, and because you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. Complacency, lukewarmness, apathy is putrid to the Lord. And he said, I'll spit you out of my mouth. It's unpalatable to him. And then he says this, you think you're rich and you don't need anything. You rely on your own self-sufficiency. But in truth, you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. There are a few things that we can move towards quicker than self-sufficiency. I think often of that movement that Adam and Eve had in the garden toward their own self-sufficiency. And often in all of the access that we have, especially here in America, we think we're so rich and we don't need anything. And so we move towards our own self-sufficiency. We set our own agenda. We mark our own day. We create our own path. We're going to do it the way we're going to do it, with no thought about what the Lord may be desiring for us to do, and not realizing that the only question we really need to have answered is, am I doing what God's told me to do? I don't want to do anything that's my agenda. I've tried that before. I could have gotten this rebuke many times. But the older I get, the more I know if He's not doing it with me, it's like Moses said, if you're not going, I'm not going either. And he said, when you move towards that self-sufficiency, you think you're so rich, but let me tell you what you really are. You're blind, you're pitiable, and you're naked. Boy, what a sad commentary on the state of a heart or the state of a church. But it is a very real reality for many of us. I heard a missionary say one time, when someone asked him, wouldn't he rather come to America than be on the mission field? He said, I would rather be here battling the demons we have here than going back to America and battling theirs. Because I don't think there's anywhere else on the face of the earth that lives with a spirit of self-sufficiency like Americans. And Jesus said, I would rather you be hot or cold than lukewarm. Because if you are, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. That's a sobering thought on a Monday morning.